National Conference in Nasrec for day 3 of the gathering. Voting for the top 7 takes place today. Let's get some analysis now, joined by Professor Dirk Kotze, who is a professor of political sciences at Unisa, for some analysis. Professor, very good morning to you. Thanks for your time. With voting for new leadership set to get underway this morning, it looks to be a closely contested presidential race between President Cyril Ramaphosa and Zweli Mkhize. What are the likelihoods in your view?
Well, I think one doesn't know what has happened in the last 3 days in terms of caucusing and even recruiting support for the different candidates. But if one looks at the nomination process, then President Ramaphosa has a clear majority over Zweli Mkhize, about a 2/3 versus a third. It might change marginally, but I don't think it's going to change substantially, because branches do have, or delegates do have mandates from their branches to vote in a particular way, and as individuals they are not supposed to change that. So this is therefore not a personal position that these delegates must take, but rather a collective one in terms of what their branches or their mandate givers have given to them. What we have seen, what is interesting, is those new nominations that came from the floor, and especially now for also the new position that was created, that means of a second Deputy Secretary General, which means that we are in future will have to talk about the top 7 and not the top 6. But Dr. Gwen Ramokgopa is now a new nomination in that respect. And then we have seen some other failed attempts, like that of Lindiwe Sisulu, as well as some others. Dr. Dlamini Zuma also refused or declined the nomination. So in the end, the original nominations are more or less the backbone of the elections for today, and I don't think it's going to change really dramatically from what we've seen, let's say, a week or so ago already.
On the other end, the ANC's RET faction has delivered what is seemingly a killer blow, a notification from former President Jacob Zuma that he will privately prosecute President Cyril Ramaphosa based on Advocate Villa Downer's corruption prosecution against him, where Zuma claims that he reported alleged prosecutorial misconduct on Downer's part to Ramaphosa, but Ramaphosa failed to act. Now, legal experts are saying the move has zero legal standing. Looking at reactions on Twitter, there's been a lot of excitement from the RET faction especially. It creates some confusion, these well-timed attempts of private prosecution. What's your view?
Well, I think I should agree with the legal advice, not Twitter. Twitter is a sort of public opinion, but doesn't really will be the determining factor in this situation. It's clearly opportunistic. I mean, I have to say that. It is not something which comes a long way. It is clearly what is the objective, is not to prosecute President Ramaphosa, but to disqualify him for this position or to force him to step aside. And because it's so clear, I think that's one of the main reasons why it will not be accepted as a valid point for such a step to be taken, and why it will be rejected most possibly by the courts, but by the ANC in general also. So it is a last attempt by President Zuma in order to open up the space for the other candidates. But I think what one has to also keep in mind that there's also difference of opinion of who are actually their candidates, because Dr. Mkhize on the one hand is the presidential candidate, but President Zuma announced much earlier on Dr. Dlamini Zuma as actually his preferred candidate. So the question is, who do they really support? Is there something like a RET anymore? And are they to a large extent unified in who they want to support in these elections?
Yeah. On Friday, interestingly, Ramaphosa and Zuma caused a stir when they were caught on camera, sharing a light-hearted moment hours after Zuma indicated that he would be instituting the private prosecution against the president. I mean, I suppose it begs the question, who's fooling who? What was that all about?
Well, this is posturing. This is what the public is seeing, and I think what they try to, especially President Ramaphosa is trying to do, is not to present himself as someone who is antagonistic towards his opponents and towards persons who clearly tries to prevent him from becoming the next president again. But I think this follows what he's trying to say in public, and that is, even if you don't like people, we in the ANC must work towards some form of unity within the ANC. And we've seen that in the past also. It's not the first time where at crisis moments or moments of tension that they are talking with each other and that they have even a light-hearted moment. So I don't think one must make much out of this. This is meant for the rest of the delegates to see that there is not that type of absolute tension between them.
The other position, going back to the voting and nominations, is that of deputy president, which many are saying that it should be one that should be very closely watched, especially as it gives the incumbent good leverage to make a play for presidency in the next electoral cycle. What do you make of the candidates that are vying for that position, especially now, given what we're hearing about the support from the branches when it comes to Paul Mashatile?
Yes, Paul Mashatile is clearly the favorite at this point in time, based on the nominations, but also what we've seen subsequent to that. The way in which he is actually playing so many roles within the old top six, as acting on behalf of the Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General, as well as being the Treasurer General. So he's actually in three positions to a large extent. That gave him a huge advantage over any other candidate in order to stand for this position. Whether the Deputy President's position is earmarked to be the successor for the President, we've seen now with this conference, which I think is quite significant, that the ANC is moving away from that practice. The current Deputy President, David Mabuza, is not nominated even, and he declined to be nominated again from the floor. So, and at the same time, in the 2024 election, the ANC is not secured of a majority again. So if there's going to be some form of coalition government, it does not mean that the position of President and Deputy President is already guaranteed for the ANC in a government after 2024. So it's a new ball game. It's new rules of the political game that we are seeing that's going to unfold very soon. And that will affect to some extent the outcome of these, or the effect of these elections also for the future.
Yeah. Professor, perhaps while we're still on the line, let's give viewers some insight on who exactly has been nominated as we take a look at some of the names. Of course, looking there at the incumbent President Cyril Ramaphosa and Zweli Mkhize for the ANC president as a candidate there, and also looking at the next in line, ANC President, zooming in there on Zweli Mkhize, who's an NEC member at the moment, and trying, of course, to gauge the tight presidential race against the two candidates. And when it comes to the other positions, of course, the very important ANC Deputy President position that you were speaking about at the moment, Paul Mashatile and Zweli Mkhize also up there. Ronald Lamola also named when it comes to the ANC Deputy President position there, speaking to younger candidates and the call for more of the younger leadership to form part of the top 7 structure. ANC National Chairperson candidates, Gwera Mantashe, being put there. And Stanley Matabata's name also coming to the forefront. David Masondo, ANC National Chairperson, another candidate there when it comes to voting that took place, and nominations, pardon me, the Secretary General position. The candidates being Dumiseni Nduli, who's a former KZN Secretary. Pumulo Maswele, who's a former Eastern Cape Premier, and Figile Mbalula, who's head of elections. So those are some of the names being put forward. Secretary General position there. Nomvula Mokonyane, Mama Action, First Deputy Secretary General, her name also being put out there. Tina Jumat-Peterson, First Deputy Secretary General as well as a candidate. The position of Second Deputy Secretary General, Marupene Ramokgoba, ANC Women's League National Coordinator at the moment, Ronald Nalumango, Second Deputy Secretary General, that name being also put out. The position of Treasurer General, Gwen Ramokgoba, who's an NEC member, the only female candidate being put on that list. Bejani Chauke as the Treasurer General, who's an ANC member. Bula Mabe, who's the national spokesperson of the ANC, also being put down for nomination under the Treasurer General position. The last one named, Zondile Masina, Ekurhuleni Regional Chair, also vying for that post of Treasurer General. Yeah, so those are some of the candidates that are up for nomination. I suppose when it comes to younger leadership, Professor, what's your take on names such as David Masondo, who is nominated for the position of chairperson? He hasn't been endorsed by the ANC in any of the country's provinces, and he's up against party favourite Limpopo Premier Stanley Mathabata and Gwera Mantashe. What do you make of that tight corner there?
Well, it looks like Stanley Mathabata is the front runner at this stage. As you indicated, is the Premier of Limpopo. Limpopo is an important province in this election. We've just heard about it earlier on again, about their delegates. And it is for President Ramaphosa a very important province. What we have to keep in mind is that in these elections, and the nominations firstly, but then the elections themselves also, that it's not only about the individual candidates, but it is also about the representation of the different provinces in the top 7. Mm-hmm. And I think this was one of the key dilemmas that the ANC experienced in the past 5 years, is, for example, that KZN didn't have anyone in the top 6. We've seen it now with Tina Jumat-Peterson, who's been elected by the Northern Cape as the first Deputy Secretary General. And it's an indication of that it is the province who wants to have someone there. What we are seeing here is a sort of an interplay between individual candidates as well as provincial representation in the top structure of the ANC. Yeah. That will also be the case in the election of the NEC later on. So what I think what we are seeing in the case of the national chairpersons is, on the one hand, Gwera Mantashe, who is originally from the Eastern Cape and tries to bring in some support from the Eastern Cape to the President Ramaphosa's campaign. But although he is most of the time actually in Gauteng, then Stan Mathabata, who's from Limpopo, both of them are pro-Ramaphosa persons. So that is another dynamic of this election, that it is not sort of factional in nature. David Masondo to a large extent also. What makes him interesting is that he is in a relatively junior position in cabinet as the Deputy Minister of Finance, but he is quite a prominent person in the South African Communist Party. So that's another dimension that comes into this, in his candidature for this position. But in the end, I don't think it's going to be, the main contention will be between Gwera Mantashe and Stanley Mathabata.
Very well, thank you so much. Let's perhaps leave it there for now, and thank you, Professor Dirk Kotze, who is a Professor of Political Sciences at Unisa, giving us a breakdown on some of those names that have been put out for nomination. Of course, the voting process is set to get underway today.